Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review. And today we're going to be looking at my hunting knives. The three knives I use primarily for big game hunting. And we'll talk about those three knives briefly. I don't spend a lot of time on knife reviews. But this one I figured that these three knives I use interchangeably. One of them is newer than the other three, so I haven't used it as much as the other two. But we'll get into this right now and talk about just the three knives I use primarily for hunting purposes, big game hunting. Okay, the first one is the Revo. And I'll get some pictures up here so that you can get a better look at it. But the Revo is an outstanding knife. I'm not sure that they make this model anymore. You might want to contact Revo. They have a web page. I'll make sure that that web page is in the link in the description so that you can at least get to the web page. And if they don't make it, harass them to making more of these, because this is a great knife. It has a pretty good thick spine in the back. This to me is a good hunt camp knife. You know, when you get to a camp and you're doing all kinds of different chores and that. It has a nice slicey type blade to it. It's a flat grind all the way to the top, but it's also a thick knife on the back, on the spine of the knife. So this knife can take some abuse, but the very edge down there, it's pretty thin. It's not a hollow grind, so it's got a little bit of a wedge to it. So you're going to get a handful of years, 10 years out of this knife before you start sharpening up into that thinner section of the knife, and that wedge becomes steeper and steeper as far as the cutting wedge goes. But this knife is great. I love the finger grooves in the handle. It's awesome. It fits really, really well. You've got a lanyard hole on the back side. You've also got a striking surface there if you need to. But this knife is great. The sheath that it comes with is a Kydex sheath with the, I forget what kind of clip this is. I'll put that in the video here so you see it right away. But it's got the clip that you can put on belts, you can put it on backpack straps, all kinds of things. You can move this around on the Kydex. You've got different mounting holes on here. If you want to put a different one on here, you can take these off. It's just regular Phillips screw heads on here. You can take this off and mount another one on there. But I like the positive click of this sheath when it comes to this knife, and it doesn't bounce out at all. It's good. This is a great utility knife, survival knife. I use it primarily for hunting because of the shape of the blade. The shape of the blade is a belly shape to it, so it does a great job for caping, skinning, that kind of thing. I don't use this for field dressing because it's just too wide. I need something that's a little bit more narrow to get into the cavities and things like that to really clean things out. So I like this knife a lot. The nice little touch on here is just the laminate handle has some burnt orange color to it. Burnt orange is my favorite color, so we'll put that down on your Christmas list for me. Next up is the Americana, Montana Americana. This is a custom-made knife out of, I want to say it's Big Fork, Montana, on the east side of Lake Kalispell. And this is another Nessmuk blade, has a nice belly to it. It's got a good patina on it. The gentleman, I think it's Dennis Heike, was the knife manufacturer, the artisan's name. And I think he used blade steel out of logging mills, the sawmill blades. And I think he used those, so really, really high carbon steel, very tough, you know, I think a harder steel because of what those sawmill blades were doing. But just a fantastic design. When you look at this and you look at the woodwork that's on here, the brass pins, the leather lanyard here through the hole there at the end and the lanyard hole, the blade itself is just a beautiful blade, beautiful setup. And again, the sheath, you know, they make their own sheaths. I think his wife made the leather work on the sheaths, so they cut that out, brass rivets in there for the back for the belt loop. So just a simple belt loop. Good retention in here. I wouldn't necessarily bounce this one upside down for very long, but it has good enough retention, I think, for this knife to really do a good job. I love this knife. I actually have used this knife quite a bit for skinning, and it's a wonderful knife for skinning because you don't have a sharp tip at the end. You've got a nice belly on there, so you can really, you know, work the skin off the animal and do a good job of getting the animal ready for actual butchering. As far as cost goes, I think this one was right around $100 or just over $100. But again, out of business. Sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. I just want to share my knives with you, and also just the type of knives that I use here in western Montana for big game and field dressing and butchering, things like that. This is a knife I've had since the early 80s, and it has been, it's not one that I've tried to get rid of. It's not like I'm dissatisfied with it, but it's not one that I've look around and say, oh, that's a beautiful looking knife. But this was a cheap knife they used to sell in hunting stores in Minnesota, suburbs of Minnesota. It's a Western, sometimes under the Coleman name, but it's a Western knife. That's the brand name, is Western. And I like the thinness of the blade itself. And I was talking about that when it came down to the Revo. When you look at these two blades, you're going to see the difference in why one is better for field dressing and the other one is better for caping and skinning. Okay, get a lot of, into tighter areas, and you can really, with the tip being finer, you can get in there and slice things that need to be sliced so that they release and you can field dress the animal. But it's one of my favorite knives. It's a classic. It's actually, I think, becoming a I don't want to say a vintage knife, but maybe a collectible knife. They've gone up a little bit in price from when I bought it, which is highly unusual for a knife that I paid probably $40 for in the store. Good steel. It's not a hard steel. It's a softer steel, so it's easy to resharpen. I always keep it sharp. And for the purposes of field dressing, I'm not bumping into a lot of bones when I'm field dressing. So it stays sharp. I could probably do 3 or 4 big game animals, probably, maybe 2 elk with this one, or 3 or 4 whitetail deer, deer in general, before you really start to notice how dull the blade gets. Because when field dressing, you want that kind of almost scalpel precision when you're in there working around things and cutting certain things free and never cutting other things, because it will gross you out. So the sheath on this one is just a classic sheath from that era. It's stitched leather, it's quality leather, riveted on the back for the belt loop, and it has a retention clip on the front handle there. So just a classic overall knife. I really like it. Every year I put a little mink oil on the handle, because this handle actually is made up of stacked leather. So you take leather cuts and that are thick, and you stack one on top of the other, drill a hole through them all, put them through here, and then just really sand down, grind down, and knife down, however they do it. I'm not really that familiar with it, but they get it down to a handle shape. And so really this is layer upon layer upon layer of leather stacked on top of each other. And then you've got the bolstering here that on the handle, which is awesome. And it fits my hand just perfectly. Okay, I get all 4 fingers in there. My pinky bumps up against the butt end of the grip, and then I've got my finger up here against the guard up here, which is just perfect. And I can also do a lot of other things. Get my finger right up against the brass bolster here. It works out really well. So those are the 3 knives I use for hunting all the time. I've used this one for 40 years. Oh man, almost. I think it's been a big game animal every year. So calculate that out. And skinning wise, I've been using this probably for the last 5-ish years, and this one really does not dull that easily because it's tool steel. Not exactly sure what the composition of tool steel is, but I know it's tougher. And this will be the first year that I actually use this for skinning. I have used it for camping. I like this knife. It's beefy. It's got a good spine to it. But I'm going to use it for some skinning this year and see what happens. So they're the 3 knives I use for hunting and for field dressing, for skinning. All the stuff that happens before you actually start butchering the animal for the freezer. So put in the comments down below any knives that you use, things that work well for you, sharpening systems, types of steel that you use on hunting knives, skinning knives, field dressing knives, the whole thing. I've actually I don't have it out here with me, but I've been using on occasion the replaceable blades that are basically razor blades. And I forget the name of the company, but anyway, very, very slick to use, very thin blade. Sometimes those are even better than even my classic 40-year-old Western knife. So I highly recommend those knives too. I probably should have brought that out here to show you. I'll throw a picture in there to show you what I'm talking about. But these knives have basically it's a razor blade that you can swap out super fast. And there's no sharpening of these. You can sharpen if you want, I suppose, but it's probably not worth the time. You just unpackage another razor blade end or razor blade knife basically, and slap that onto the receiver end of the knife, and you go back at it with a razor blade. So it really does a great job of just a very sharp, very fine knife, great for field dressing. So that would be, I guess, the other one I don't have out here on me, but it's not quite a classic. It's not really a fixed blade because you take the blades on and off. So I just wanted to show you my 3 fixed blades that I'm going to be using and have been using for a long time. So put the comments down below what you think of that, what other ideas you have. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time.